join in this discussion and to see some of the videos and hear some of the contributions here today. I'm the Home Secretary. There's been a Home Secretary in the UK since 1782, and their job has always been to protect Britain's borders, whether it's against terrorism or crime. And of course that responsibility has always had to balance the need for ensuring that people can live in freedom and have the freedom of speech, the freedom of expression, the freedom of worship, and balancing those rights against the kind of threat that they face, whether in whatever form of extremism. And extremism can come with religious extremism, or political extremism from the right or the left. And the one thing I'm absolutely sure about is that the way to protect my country against, where I have responsibility, against those kind of threats is not to actually destroy the very things we're trying to protect, that freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And it's a very difficult balance, but it's a very important balance. And I think the role of the media, I've been talking, this is my first day in Pakistan, but just talking about what happened in Swat Valley earlier on this year, and the public support for that. One view that was expressed to me was, in Pakistan we haven't always had a free press, and we haven't had a free media, and actually the reason for suppressing the media is it was thought that was vital to ensuring that you maintain public opinion on your side. You suppressed any contrary view. But actually the success in government terms is that the public supported what was happening against extremism. And a large reason why they did that is because a free press and a free media was there to actually engage and report on that. And I think that's very important. I was just reflecting here about the ability of the media to change people's lives. And in the UK, there was a very important, and culture and theatre. In the UK in the 1960s, there was a play on television called Cathy Come Home. And it's famous in British history because that play, which was an hour on television, pointed out what the problems of homelessness in the UK. It led to the establishment of a charity called Shelter. It led to an enormous explosion of public anger and real pressure on the government to tackle homelessness. And if I can think of another example, probably more recently in the 80s, Band Aid, there were documentaries on the television about poverty in Africa, Ethiopia in particular, and a whole movement grew up around that. The only thing I'd point out is that in those days, and I'm old enough to have grown up in those days, there were 2 television channels. And when Cathy Come Home was on the television, you had in the UK 20 million people watching what was called Play for Today, or whatever it was, every Friday night at 8 a.m. The whole family would sit down and watch the programme together. The difference now, of course, is a diverse media. No one's mentioned the internet and Facebook and all these things that youngsters in particular look at and do not necessarily follow the media. And if they're watching television, they've got 78 channels to choose from, and no one all sits down and watches the same channel on the same night. So that might be a challenge, but also I would guess, in terms of the term that was used, an enabling environment. I know an enabling environment is about social issues, and at the heart of all the problems of extremism are social issues: poverty, unemployment, poor education, poor healthcare. But the enabling environment might also be for individuals to get their views across. And it's a double-edged sword in the sense that it's something on the internet you can't control, and there are bad things on there as well as good things. People learn how to engage in terrorism. They watch the kind of videos that you were talking about. But I think it must be a fundamental force for good to have the opportunity for people to express their views, perhaps from their bedroom, on part of new technology that I confess I don't understand as much as many of you do. But so the one thing I'm sure of is freedom of speech, freedom of expression can't just be confined to one class or one prosperous group. It has to be opened up to everyone, whether it's in the Northwest Frontier Territories or whether it's in, Tower Hamlets in London. Is point number one. point number 2 is how they use that freedom of expression must also involve the ability for an extremist view to be countered by a more moderate view, not from people like me as politicians. I mean, a fundamental issue of how you counter terrorism has nothing to do with armies or politicians or judges. It's to do with people themselves challenging a view of Islam perhaps that doesn't reflect their view, that having that exchange of views. Extremism thrives on intolerance and on one point of view being the dominant point of view and everything else being suppressed. And I think there are so many interesting points raised by this discussion. I just wonder how the new internet age is going to allow Kathy come home to actually fundamentally change society.